Hey, what's up guys? Today I'm going to show you how to build acoustic panels for your home studio. Not only does it make the room sound better, it also makes the room look pretty damn good. It's a really simple concept, and once you can get your head around the idea of how the panels are built, you can customize it in terms of the size and the color material you want to use to sort your vibe. So I'm going to cut the fluff, get straight into it. Basically the material that you need is some hardboard to back the panels, some Rockwool to fill the panels. You need some wood to build the frames for the panels, and then lastly you're going to need some material to cover the panels. And choosing the material, it's not rocket science. What you want to do is you want to find a material that is breathable, and basically what that means is air can pass through it, kind of like the masks we've been wearing these days. Well, not anymore. So basically what you do is you grab the material, put your lips up against it, and you breathe in. And if you can breathe air through the material, it's good enough to use. So you're going to have a lot of options in terms of colors. If you can't breathe through it, there's no real point in building these panels apart from like the cosmetic look it will give your studio. If you can't breathe through it, the sound waves won't be able to penetrate it, won't be able to get through the material into the rock wool and be dispersed. And that's sort of what we're going for with the sound panels. We're trying to break those waves from bouncing round and round. So yeah, make sure that's breathable. So we're going to put this thing together using wood glue, some drywall screws, and a staple gun. A couple of other tools that you're going to need. You're going to need a drill of sort. If you've got a posi head, that also helps sink these drywall screws in nice and quickly. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. A screwdriver and some elbow grease does the job. You're going to need a carpenter's blade. Scissors will do the same job. A square and a corner jig. If you don't have these tools, there's always a workaround. And then lastly, you're going to need a tape measure to figure out where to make your cuts. I'm going to start by cutting the wood for the frames. Don't stress if you don't have a saw or if you don't feel like cutting wood. Most lumber shops will cut the wood for you if you give them the cut list. I'm a bit of a woodwork enthusiast, so I enjoy doing this type of thing. So I'm going to start cutting the wood and then we'll get into building the frames. Pro tip: measure twice, cut once. So I've got my wood ready to build the frames. I am building panels that are going to be 15 inches wide by 70 inches long. You can obviously build the panels to the size that you want to. The sort of the principle stays the same, the measurements just change. The reason I decided to go with 15-inch wide is because the rock wool itself comes in 15-inch wide panels, and I just thought rather than having to cut through it to make it thinner or cut a piece and add a piece that runs next to it, I'll rather kind of just stick with its native size. So just bear that in mind, whatever insulation you're using. Look how wide it is and try to figure out if you want to cut things or not. The next step is to basically build these frames, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So if you haven't got a corner jig, I would highly recommend that you get one. They're really not expensive and you can get them at pretty much any hardware store. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Essentially how this thing works is you would take one piece of your panel and you would slide it in, fasten that clamp, and then you would take your other piece of your frame or your panel, stick it in to that side, you'd line up the corners, and you would fasten that side. And then essentially what you have is something holding your corners together for you, and you're free to do things with your hands. Very simple concept, and it will save you a lot of time. The next step is basically to drill pilot holes and sort of sink the screws. If you don't do pilot holes, it's also not the end of the world. When you've got a drywall screw through soft wood like this, you can essentially just ram it in and it'll sort of create its own path. But if you want to do it neatly, knock 2 pilot holes in, the screw will sort of follow that hole as a guide. You can use wood glue. I'm going to use wood glue. It's not absolutely essential. We're not building a house like with a superstructure. These things aren't that heavy. But yeah, if you are going to use wood glue, put some wood glue on, put the two pieces together, drill the pilot holes, knock in the screws, and basically it's a case of repeating until you've got a perfect frame.
Lie, baby, look into my eyes, baby, no one's getting out alive. Fly, baby, no one can deny, baby, secret to my paradise.
Once you have finished building the frames, the next step is to add the material to them. What you want to do is lay the material down flat. I find it best to work on the floor unless you've got a large table, but you lay the material down flat, put the frame on it, and we're literally just going to take a scissors and cut out around the frame. What you want to do is leave a little bit of material on either side of the frame, top and bottom, because we're going to take this material, pull it up over the frame, and take our staple gun and we're going to staple it down. Without putting too much tension on it, we're just going to knock a staple in there and a staple in there. And I'm going to follow this line all the way through. Once I've done those lines, I'm going to do the same to the top. And when I get to this side, what I want to do is I want to pull tension. I want to get this thing as tight as possible. If the front is too loose, what will happen is you'll see on your panel the Rockwool or whatever insulation you're using, it's kind of going to push against it and you're going to see little craters and bumps. It's just not going to be nice and smooth. The corners are a little bit more tricky. I find it best to approach it like you're wrapping a gift, and with a little bit of trial and error you can get it looking neat. Once you're done with the corners, just continue, work your way around the frame, stapling down that material. Remember to pull it nice and tight when you get to the final side. Once you've finished stapling the material onto the frame, feels nice and tight on the inside here, you could take a scissors and cut all this excess material off. When you've completed putting the material on the frame, it's looking nice and neat, it's time to put the Rockwool in. You can see that my Rockwool is a bit thicker than this frame, and you can compress this to an extent, but you want to avoid compressing it too much because you're going to create a hard surface, and that is what we want to avoid. The whole purpose of the sound panel is to stop sound waves from bouncing around your room. We're trying to create a surface when the sound waves hit this panel, they need to be able to penetrate this Rockwool, and that's where the sound waves will be broken up, dispersed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it down the middle. It's really easy to do. You're basically going to eyeball where the middle is. Take your hand, kind of saw into, use it as a saw, and we're going to part it. And we're just going to continue going deeper and deeper until we are right through. Bear in mind that Rockwool can make you itch, so if you've got a sensitive skin, maybe you want to wear gloves when you do this, or otherwise just wash your hands as soon as you finish. So now I've separated my Rockwool into two pieces. I'm pretty much ready to put this into the frame. But before I do that, I need to trim it down to size. You might need to do the same thing. I've got this support beam down the middle, and this piece of Rockwool is a bit too long. It's really simple to do. You just grab a scissors or a blade and you cut right through it. I'm going to have to cut another piece to fill this gap on this side. And the same sort of principle applies. The final step is to add the hardboard to back the frame. And you can knock this hardboard in using panel pins. I'm going to use drywall screws. It just makes it easier. If I ever want to change the color of this material, I can unscrew this hardboard a lot easier than sort of trying to dig out the panel pins or the nails that you use that seem to sink into this hardboard. So what you want to do is line your hardboard up and try to get it as straight and square as possible. And with these, you don't need a pilot hole. You can literally just put the screw in and knock them straight down. So once you're finished putting the hardboard at the back, you should be left with a nice smooth sound panel that's ready to be hung. Now, I hope that you got some value from this video, but use it as a guideline. You got to do what you got to do with what you have to get the job done. And with a little bit of trial and error, there's no reason why you can't make your own sound panels. So good luck, and I'll see you again.